Hello everyone and welcome back. It is Boone. Today I am not going to be talking about being trans, at least not specifically. It will come up. Spoiler alert. What I am going to be talking about are the TV shows that I've watched throughout my life that have had the biggest influence on me. I know this is a little bit different, but I was thinking recently about what are the pieces of media, and it kind of fell into the TV category ultimately, that have impacted me the most in my life and have affected who I am and how I live my life now. I will say right away that there are too many to name. As I got thinking about it, I realized how much TV has had an impact on my life. There are so many shows, books, movies that have really affected how I interact with the entertainment industry, how I've gotten to know myself and maintain relationships and all this deep stuff that I didn't think about for a really long time, and then it got on my brain and now I can't stop thinking about it. So today I'm just going to highlight a few different shows that stand out in my mind, and I'm gonna go sort of in chronological order. Starting with Ren and Stimpy. This show came out a decade before I was born, but because of the magic of this thing called reruns, I was able to grow up with it. If you've never seen Ren and Stimpy, it is just about one of the most insane shows in the world. It is notorious for somehow making it to air despite the content being seemingly very adult at times. This wasn't too uncommon in the 90s, and even now there's a little bit of it. Less so, I would say. But you know, things like Rocko's Modern Life, SpongeBob SquarePants, Animaniacs had a lot of innuendo, but Ren and Stimpy went beyond that. There was explicit content that I just don't quite understand how it could be marketed towards kids, but it was. And this was my favorite show as a kid. I think the thing that I really latched onto was the absurdity of it and how chaotic it was, and you really didn't know what was going to happen. It has absolutely informed my sense of humor, more so than maybe anything else that I've consumed since then. Because I was so little when I watched that show, and I watched it so much, it became an integral part of my comedic senses and sensibilities. I grew up just making lots of silly voices and singing and doing wacky comedic things all the time and making movies and coming up with like just strange skits that, you know, I didn't put on in any formal way, but I was just always like coming up with characters and being zany, and I feel like that show, Ren and Stimpy, might be the earliest thing I can trace that back to, that sort of inspired all the wackiness that ensued throughout my life afterwards. There are a number of other shows that I watched around the same time that kind of fall into this category too. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy absolutely deserves to be mentioned. SpongeBob is less insane and absurd, but I think it definitely informed my sense of humor. Invader Zim is another great one. Just these shows that were so off the wall, they really spoke to my need to be loud and weird all the time. Moving in an entirely different direction, the next show I want to talk about is a little show called Soap. Soap was a 1970s sitcom, and I watched only like a few episodes, I think. I was probably like 7 or 8 at the time, maybe not, no, I don't think I was even 9, I think it was like 7 or 8. Maybe even younger, I don't know, I was very young. My dad showed us this show, my brothers and me, and it was really funny and I liked it a lot, but the thing that really struck me was that Billy Crystal's character has what was then called a sex change operation. I've actually talked about this on my channel before, and I don't remember which video, but that was in a very strange, interesting way, sort of the catalyst for my coming out and realizing that I was transgender. I think at this point, I was really young. Like, I think it was probably only like a few years before that I had kind of gotten familiar with the term gay. So this was like, yeah, I don't know. I wish I could go back and know what year this was, but I was probably floating around the age of 7. So I saw this character get what was called a sex change operation, and I didn't really understand what that was, and I certainly didn't know if it was real or not. But from what I saw in the show, my understanding of it was that you get the surgery and then you're a girl. I had been experiencing dysphoria for a while at this point, but I didn't know how to talk about it at all. This show gave me hope. I didn't even know if the surgery was real, and it's, you know, like, it's so ridiculous to think of soap with Billy Crystal being this big important event in my transition, but it was. Nothing really came of that for several years, but I think the seed was planted in me that maybe this was a thing that was possible and I didn't have to be trapped in a body I didn't like for the rest of my life. Cut to over a decade later, and I have had bottom surgery, so thank you, Billy Crystal, and thank you, soap. Now, this is a much more recent example, but this show has been hugely important for me in recent years, and that is the new Harley Quinn animated series. I think I watched that show like a year after it came out. I was a little slow to it, but I loved it right away. It's very, very funny. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend it to anyone. I've always been a bit of a superhero geek, and I've liked the DC universe and things like that, and so I was attracted to that show because it had that, and it was also just an adult sitcom kind of style. I mean, adult sitcom, that's true, but what I meant to say was like an animated sitcom, which is also true. It was a combination of these two things that I really liked, and I think it was done really well because it pays homage to the DC universe in really fun ways, but it's also just a completely different tone than most of what you would expect. There are sort of two events that happened from me watching this show that made it very, very special to me and made it have such an impact on my life. Now, this next bit is going to be full of spoilers. It's not really that spoilerish now, I feel like, because the plot point I'm going to be talking about is basically a huge part of how they've promoted season 3. But if you haven't seen anything of Harley Quinn, you don't want any spoilers at all, just skip past the next, like, couple minutes. So, at the end of season 2, Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy run away together in a romantic fashion. Now, despite Harley Quinn's, you know, villainish, nightmarish ways, she resonates with me as a character quite a lot. I feel like I have a lot of her upbeat, spontaneous nature, and just her as a person beyond all the kookiness is something that I have related to for a long time in many ways. So I kind of imprinted on her, and she's the character that I love. She's one of my favorite fictional characters ever, and there have been many wonderful iterations of her with different actors and comics as well, comic books to be clear. But I will say that I have a personal special place in my heart for Kaylee Cuoco's performance. I loved her on The Big Bang Theory, and then when I saw her on this, she just blew me away. Having only known her from The Big Bang Theory prior, this was such a departure from that, and oh my god, is she incredible. So I was a fan already. It was already special to me in some way, but what really did it was the lesbian relationship with Poison Ivy. This wasn't the first example of LGBT representation or lesbian representation in cartoons, but it was a huge one for me. I think largely it was because I liked the character so much. I was rooting for this character so much, and when you get that attached to a main character especially, and then this ship that people have becomes canon, it's gigantic, it's huge. There are a number of lesbian couples now in cartoons in recent years, which I'm very, very grateful for, that have impacted me and have been so wonderful to see, but this one, for I think a combination of a few reasons, really is just the most special to me. I think maybe it's because, you know, it's a serialized show, and it's so gripping, and I love it for so many different reasons, and this character is so iconic. To see her relationship within the show be a lesbian one, you know, especially after going from the Joker, and it's like this wonderful story of going from an abusive relationship and then the gayness wins. The other event I am going to speak about is on my 20th birthday. I came home from a friend's house, and my brother gave me the first 3 issues of the Eat, Bang, Kill Tour, which was like the Harley Quinn animated series based comics. I was super stoked to get them. They had like one of the covers was of Harley and Ivy making out, and I'm just like, this is so fantastic for lesbians. And then on that night, it's just like pretty late at night when I got home, my brother was watching, a different brother, I have 3, was watching through the Harley Quinn series, the cartoon. So I went downstairs and watched it, and I was just, like, the acting on that show is so good, and we watched some of the most emotional episodes that night just by chance, and I was kind of going through a rough time for a while, and this is a while back, just in terms of so much has evolved for me since then as an actor at this point. I feel like just in life I was a little bit more lost, and it really, like, I can't explain it, but it was this sort of epiphany of storytelling and acting and the beauty of it, and it just like kind of blew my mind. And then after that I went and read the comics, and the comics are just like, it's just so gay. It's all about Harley and Ivy's relationship, really, those first 3 comics. There's a lot of fun action adventure as well, but that's like the huge plot point. And it was so real, and it was so touching, and like I said, at that point in my life I was kind of struggling a bit and just uncertain and like, I don't know, I was lacking a lot of hope, to be honest. And then reading those comics, they almost felt tailor-made to me in a way, and I know it's a selfish perspective, but at that time it was just exactly what I needed, and I was just filled with this sense of hope that I, as I just said, very much needed. Seeing them have this happily ever after, which admittedly was full of all kinds of problems too, but still, like, seeing that, it was so grounded, and it was so cool, and it was also superheroes, and it was also comedic, and it was just this combination of things, and it just kind of gave me this sense of like, Boone, you crazy son of a gun, you can be happy too. I just love Harley Quinn for so many different reasons, and I love the comics, and I love comic books in general, and I love her cartoon, and I love cartoons in general, and so it's been a thing that's like related to my sexuality, and my acting profession, and like, so all of these things kind of came together to really just, it felt like this motivational push, just keep going, you know? So I've already talked for a while, and I don't have time to get into everything, but I will give a couple of quick shout outs to other shows that influenced me pretty greatly. Teen Titans and Avatar: The Last Airbender are just, I'm gonna mention them the same thing because I feel like they impacted me in very similar ways. Avatar: The Last Airbender is my favorite TV show of all time. It is a beautiful, beautiful show. It does not talk down to its audience at all, despite the fact that it is, you know, a kid's show. At least that's how it's labeled. It's totally appropriate for kids. It's not, you know, it's nothing like Ren and Stimpy in that way at all. It just is mature and touches on some very, very serious and real topics in a beautiful way. Animation, music, storytelling, character development, everything about it is gorgeous. I started watching this show when I was probably 3 years old, and then my family and I would watch the new episodes as they came out. And I think to have something that well made as a kid, and it was accessible to a kid, it really helped me to see the potential in the medium of animation. Now, having done cartoons professionally, I just am very thankful to have had shows like that, and Teen Titans was very similar in a lot of ways. Growing up at such a young age, it gave me a respect for the medium, and it really inspired me in my own storytelling endeavors. Teen Titans is a fantastic show, similar, doesn't talk down to its audience, and I watched that around the same time, so I just kind of think of them in that similar boat. I've also read the Teen Titans comics, some of them, I mean some of the new ones, and they're fantastic, so check them out. And then finally I'm going to do another pair because they impacted me in very similar ways and at similar times. The Powerpuff Girls and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I've always been a fan of. I grew up watching the 2003 series for the most part, and played the video games, but it was when the 2012 series came out. I actually got into it a couple years after. I was 12 at the time. I got super into the Turtles again when that came out. Because of that show, and because I was so interested in that new series, and I also went back and watched the 80s series when it happened, I started stumbling upon all these interviews of voice actors on YouTube. One of the main actors I would continue to see, because he was on both the original 80s series and the 2012 series, was Rob Paulsen. He played Raphael in the 80s series and Donatello on the newer series, and so I would watch all these interviews with him, and it kind of led me into other voice actors, and I opened up this world for me, and I got so interested in it. I got to meet Rob Paulsen when I was 15, and he is a hero and an idol of mine to this day, and that was one of the coolest experiences of my life. And if it weren't for him, and if it weren't for that show, I don't know if I would have pursued the career that I have now. Powerpuff Girls was a similar thing. Around that time I was also just getting into Powerpuff Girls, and I watched it as a kid all the time. I think it was actually from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and from those interviews I was talking about, it kind of led me to Tara Strong and all these other things, and so I started watching panels and interviews related to that as well. At one point I watched on YouTube a recording of this Powerpuff Girls panel at Kamikaze Expo, I believe it was, and it was Kathy Cavadini, Tara Strong, and E.G. Daily, who played the three Powerpuff Girls. I was really so captivated and intrigued by this entire industry and the people who did it at this point. And about maybe halfway through, maybe more than that, through the panel, watching it, I just had this moment where I said to myself, I am going to do this for a living. Whatever it takes, I'm going to have careers like those three up on that stage. I'm gonna do it. And at 12 and 13, those ages for me were like firecracker times. I really believed if I wanted something, I was going to get it. And I was like certain of it. I just was so ambitious, and I still am in many ways, but at that age specifically, like, there was no like adult realism in my brain weighing me down whatsoever. If I really wanted something, I was like, I'm gonna go for it and I'm gonna do it. So whenever I think about what kind of got me interested in pursuing cartoons, because I had wanted to be a professional actor earlier in my childhood, and it was kind of an off and on thing that I was pursuing, but never seriously, because I was too busy being a kid. But when I think about that kind of transitioning into, doing cartoons, acting for cartoons, how amazing would that be? I think of Powerpuff Girls, and I think of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I still love both series to this day. I mean, the Powerpuff Girls is just so freaking funny, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, all of the iterations to me I enjoy for different reasons, and I love playing the games. So those shows are very, very special to me. That was known as rapid fire, as I wanted those last few shows to be, but I'll edit this video and hopefully it's not too long. I know this is different, y'all, and I'm sorry if it wasn't, the content you're used to, but I just wanted to talk about it, and so I did. If you have any ideas for me to talk about certain things, trans-related or not, please let me know, as always. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.